In our weekly briefing, Toronto police are grappling with a major crisis. Did they botch the investigation of a serial killer because of prejudice inside the force? 6 men from the LGBTQ community are dead, and a 7th is likely to be identified soon. The suspect, Bruce McArthur, is behind bars. But the community is outraged, accusing the police of bias and not treating the warning signs seriously.
The community tried to tell them, we think it's a serial killer. There are several people of color, like men, Middle Eastern men, who are missing, and they sort of seem to dismiss that.
And now, Toronto Police Chief Mark Saunders says he'll launch an independent review of the McArthur case. There are echoes here of BC's serial killer, Robert Pickton. The victims there were vulnerable women, many Indigenous, many sex workers. Police were also criticized for letting prejudice corrupt their work. Lorimer Shenher was a lead investigator on the case, and I asked him whether bias against marginalized people influenced that case.
If it were something so clear-cut as that they were marginal people, I think that would have been easier to really, fight back against. But it was much more subtle than that. I don't think any of the police officers I dealt with were overtly racist or classist or sexist, but I do think that we all, as humans, carry a lot of biases. That's just normal. And in my investigation is that there was an overarching stereotype about the type of women we were looking for. As police officers, I think sometimes mental pictures start to be formed and stereotypes start to be formed of the people that you're investigating. And sometimes those are helpful, but a lot of times I would argue that they're problematic and they get in the way of doing a robust investigation.
During the investigation, you were undercover as a woman. You've transitioned since then, but that must have given you, from what you would have been thinking and what you were reacting to, must have given you a rather unique perspective.
So I'm going through this investigation as a female and presenting as a female, but in my mind, I'm thinking this is wrong. And I had that outrage of knowing that the way that this investigation was being treated and being handled was largely because of sexism and I think because of classism. When I look at Toronto and it sounds like, the detective sergeant there who saw some problems in his investigation raised those problems within the organization, and now they're being addressed in some way, whether it's through an inquiry or some sort of external investigation. I had very similar concerns in my investigation that I raised right up to my inspector, and some of these things actually delayed the pursuit of Mr. Pickton, and those things were never addressed.
I'm sure the police in Toronto would say that they're not biased. The chief, Mark Saunders, is a black man. So how do you get your head around that?
Well, that's where I get into my own analysis of the police culture, which I believe is very difficult for visible and invisible minorities to navigate. You very much have to assimilate into that dominant culture in policing, which, let's face it, that's a dominant, it's a white, essentially straight white male culture. Well,
it's really important to hear your perspective, Lorimer. Thank you so much for talking to us. Thank you.
Thanks, Wendy. It's a pleasure.